prayer position, right? It's called Anjali Mudra. And this is a universal prayer position. You see it in almost all religions. The significance of this is the right and left sides of the body come together and unite. So that's, and in yoga, that theory is right side is masculine, left side is feminine. And in yoga, we are always looking for balance. We're always looking for creating space. So it's never about being way yang or way yin. And the idea in the practice is that I call it dynamic ease, but that's what we're looking for. Yoga, the physical practice of yoga, if you're doing vinyasa flow or the traditional postures, you know, in the Iyengar series or whatever, it's a very, very dynamic practice. But we want to find a sense of ease in that dynamic action. And I think of it as a coolness. So I want to create internal heat and fire, but I want to also have a coolness to it at the same time. So when we talk about the 5 elements, water and fire sort of balance each other. And earth and air sort of balance each other. And then space is the container of all those other elements. So we'll talk about space this afternoon a little bit as sort of the primary element. But everything in yoga is about creating balance. And I'm sorry, I just forgot your name.
Michelle.
Michelle, sorry Michelle. Michelle and I were just discussing the amount of effort to the practice. And my observation as a teacher and teaching thousands of yoga classes, that most people push too hard. You know, there's a sense that if we push harder, we're going to get more out of our practice. And part of yoga is what they call svadhyaya, or self-study. So that's one of the niyamas of this practice is observation of the self. And that's the small self as well, but on the path to the higher self. And so you want to be as honest as you can with yourself in what your tendency is in your practice. So that at some point you really begin to identify, well, I'm really kind of lazy and I don't put out much effort. And you know, you're the only person that has to know that. It doesn't have to be anything you have to reveal to anybody else. But the practice is about getting really honest with yourself, really observing your own pattern or different patterns. Anyway, what I see is a lot of people over-efforting in the practice, and that comes from, you know, always trying to go further. Now you have to go out to the edge, because if you don't go to the edge, you're never going to expand beyond the edge. You know, it's like if you've got a frontier and you only go so far out on that trail, you're never going to know what's around the next corner. But at the same time, if you go around that next corner and there's a cliff and you jump off the cliff, then everything's over. So when you play with the edge, there's a risk of injury. You can injure yourself in this practice, and we see it all the time. We see torn hamstrings. We see a lot of rotator cuff problems from too much chaturanga done with poor alignment. And those are just some of the injuries you see, but there's more. And that's okay. Just because you get injured doesn't mean you're being mindless in your practice, because it happens to all of us, I think, at some point. But what we're really looking for is to find a place of balance, so that your effort is balanced with surrender. And if you think about the 5 niyamas, the first 2 niyamas are cleanliness and contentment, saucha and santosha. But the other 3 niyamas are what they call tapas, or tapasya, which is practice, and that's the heat. That's what makes you work, and that's the yin part of that practice. The next part of that is what they call Ishwara Pranidhana, and Ishwara is the inner guru or the inner teacher, and that is essentially like the soul. It's the part of you that is the spirit of God in this universe, and every individual has that. And that's the part of surrender. So Ishwara means surrender to God, or surrender to the inner teacher. And in between Ishwara and tapas, in between that surrender and that fire of effort is swadhyaya, or self-study. And that's really what this practice is about. It's about self-study. It's about balance. It's really about the breath. The whole reason we do all these contorted postures is just to open up the body for better breathing. Breathing takes you into the mind. So if you read the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali only mentions the word asana a couple of times in that entire series of sutras. And they're only seated postures. There are no standing postures in the Yoga Sutras, basically. It's just a couple of seated postures. And the word asana means to sit comfortably with. So it doesn't mean to beat yourself up with. It's actually to sit comfortably with. So anyway, I just want to encourage you in the practice to just rest back a little bit sometimes into your practice. And that's why lots of times, usually when I make an adjustment on most of you, I'll have you come up a little bit. So when you come out of the pose, the irony here is when you come up a little bit out of the pose, it actually allows you to go deeper. Not deeper toward the floor with your hand, but deeper into the internal alignment and get the energy to move in the proper direction of the body. So I'll just mention one more thing about this. I've been involved in my life in a lot of sports. I teach kayaking as well as yoga. And if you watch a good kayaker go down a difficult rapid, it actually looks pretty easy because they're in harmony with the currents of the river. And that's what we're trying to do in yoga. We're trying to open up those internal currents, those nadis, and just have that pranic energy flowing through those nadis. And, depending on the rapids, and there are some rapids, of course, which are very dangerous, and that's not going to happen. But most rapids, you can kind of not even do anything to your boat, and you're going to bounce down through there and end up at the bottom of the pool anyway. But there's a real difference between sort of pinballing down through a rapid, out of control, with no harmony with the water. You still end up at the bottom, but it's really a different energetic feeling than being online and in harmony with those currents. And same thing with our practice. We can do Trikonasana, and it can feel funky, it can feel struggle, or we can really work toward finding the balance. And it's part of the reason this workshop is designed on this progression of starting with the feet. We're going to finish tonight with the crown of the head, but it's all related. It all connects into this sort of continuous flow of energy. Okay?